I remember the sound first, how quiet it was after the explosion of truth. The television still glowed blue in the corner, humming softly, like it knew what it had done. On the screen, frozen in shocking stillness, was his face. My father's. My real father's. The video had ended mid-sentence, but the silence that followed was louder than any shouting could have been. Mama just stood there. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Her hands hung at her sides the way wilted flowers lean toward dirt. Beside her, my grandmother clutched the hem of her apron, whispering prayers that stuck in her throat. And me, I just sat on the couch, the remote still warm in my hand, trembling from the last button I'd pressed. There was nowhere to hide. The truth was on display on our smart TV, in full color, with surround sound. Proof of a life I never knew existed. Proof of a man who'd loved a woman he wasn't supposed to love. Proof that I wasn't who I thought I was. The smell of that night still lingers in my mind. Burnt rice. She'd forgotten to turn off the stove when I called her to come see. The faint tang of lemon cleaner clung to the curtains, and underneath it all, that electric warmth from the television, like the air right before a storm. I wanted to run. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even swallow. My mouth had gone dry, my heart running wild like it wanted out of me. Mama turned to me slowly, her eyes wide and wet, but not with guilt, more like panic. Her lips parted, but no sound came. And then she whispered it. Where did you find that? The way she said it, it wasn't surprise. It was fear. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The truth is, I hadn't been looking for this. Not tonight. Not like this. I'd only been looking for his messages, that man she swore she hadn't talked to in years. The one whose number she said was just a distant cousin. The one she told me never to mention to my grandmother. But when I searched his name on her cloud backup, I found far more than text messages. There were videos, and that one, oh, that one, was enough to change everything we thought we were. Hours earlier, before the world cracked open, things were almost normal. It was a Sunday evening in early April, the kind of daylight that feels lazy and golden. The house smelled like steamed rice and fried onions. Grandma was knitting on the porch, humming the same hymn she'd hummed since I was a child. The TV played quietly in the background, one of those family dramas Mama liked but never really paid attention to. I was home visiting, just for the weekend. My apartment was too quiet these days, and somehow, this house, this old, creaking place filled with smells of oil and detergent, always pulled me back. Mama had her phone on the dining table, face down. I watched her glance at it 3 times in 1 minute, each time pretending she wasn't looking. Her fingers twitched like she wanted to reach for it, but pride held them back. She'd been like that for weeks now, distracted, too quiet, and easily startled. She'd begun locking her bedroom door again, something she hadn't done since I was 15. I noticed these things because I notice everything about her. It's a habit. She didn't raise me to miss the details. I thought maybe she had another argument with her sister. Or maybe work was stressing her again. But something in my gut, call it intuition, kept twisting, whispering that this wasn't just stress. It was guilt. And guilt has a smell of its own. I can't describe it exactly. Maybe it's something in the air, something that fills the space between words when people lie to you. That night, after she went to bed, her phone buzzed against the wooden table. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then it went still. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But curiosity loves to masquerade as concern. And I told myself I was just making sure it wasn't urgent. When I picked it up, the screen lit my face in the dark. A notification banner blinked at the top, iCloud backup complete. 3 new files. Her texts were gone. Every single one. The messages thread was empty, and old photos that used to fill her gallery, pictures from my graduation, my father's funeral, even holidays, seemed rearranged, misplaced. Someone had deleted things. Or tried to. That's when the small, reckless voice in my head said it. You know how backups work. Maybe it was the part of me that studied computer science years ago. Maybe it was the part that never could leave well enough alone. Either way, I opened her laptop. Mama kept everything simple, a silver device she used for recipes and online bills. She never imagined anyone would touch it. Her password was my birthday. Maybe she thought that was love. The cloud app was still signed in. And there it was. A folder titled Old Memories, last modified 2 hours ago. I opened the first file, just photos. A younger Mama, smiling on a beach I didn't recognize. A man next to her, lean, caramel-skinned, older. Their hands almost touching, but not quite. The kind of closeness people only allow when they think no one else is watching. The next file was a voice recording. I pressed play. His voice was deep, careful. "You can't keep hiding her, Sharon. She deserves to know." Mama's reply was softer, trembling. "Not yet. Not until she's ready. You don't know what my mother would do." Then silence. The file ended abruptly, like time itself refused to continue past that moment. Something inside me cracked open that I wish I could say I stopped there. That I respected her privacy. But the truth is, secrets smell like gasoline. You can't help but strike a match. The last file in the folder wasn't audio. It was a video. The thumbnail showed a hospital hallway. It was dated the year I was born. I hovered over it for a long time, not sure what I wanted to find or what I could survive finding. And then I clicked. The video opened with that same man's voice, shaky but full of emotion. "She's perfect, Sharon. She has your eyes." Then I saw her, my mema, holding a baby with a pink blanket. And then the camera tilted, catching a second man standing at the window. Tall, broad shoulders, smiling like the world made sense again. And my heart stopped, because that man wasn't the one who raised me. That wasn't the man I called Daddy. The variables collided in my mind like thunder. Dates. Names. Smiles. Lies. And that's when I heard her voice in the background of the video, whispering, "No one can ever know." I didn't mean to play it on the TV. Honestly, I didn't. The laptop was already connected for an earlier show, and I forgot to disconnect. One wrong click, one breath too quick, and the video filled the living room screen. I froze when I heard footsteps. Mama appeared in the doorway, half asleep in her robe, blinking at the sound. Then she saw it. Her body stiffened. Her hand went to her mouth. Behind her, Grandma stepped in, squinting at the image until it came into focus, and just like that, 40 years of silence began to break apart. Mama looked at me, her voice shaking. "Why would you do that?" I wanted to say I didn't mean to. I wanted to say nothing made sense anymore. But words wouldn't form, so I just stared at her and the man on that screen who looked a little too much like me. Now the clock on the wall ticks loud enough to drown my thoughts. The rice is burnt, the air smells like smoke, and Mama sits at the edge of the couch, her eyes shiny like she's somewhere between rage and sorrow. Grandma won't look at either of us. She just keeps whispering, "Lord Jesus, have mercy." I know there's more she's not saying. There always is. The kind of truth older people guard like family heirlooms nobody asked for. And me? I'm not angry yet. Not really. Just empty. Hollowed out in that quiet way when you realize your whole childhood might have been built on borrowed stories. Maybe this is how betrayal begins, not with shouting, but silence. Mama finally breaks that silence. "You don't understand," she starts, but her voice fades into the dark. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't. Not yet, but after tonight, I'll understand everything, because if she won't tell me the whole story, I'll find the rest myself, even if it means digging through every message he thought was deleted. Even if it hurts, even if the truth burns worse than the rice on the stove. The morning after the video, the house felt like a museum of silence. Every sound seemed too loud: the kettle's hiss, the shuffle of slippers on cool tile, the soft scrape of a spoon stirring tea that no one would drink. No one spoke. Not even Grandma, whose voice usually filled every inch of this house like old gospel music. Mama sat at the table, still wearing her robe, her face pale and drawn. Her phone lay on the counter beside her, cracked slightly at one corner from when she'd slammed it down the night before. I sat across from her, staring into the steam of my tea, watching it curl like the ghost of all the words we couldn't say. We both kept busy pretending to be calm. She buttered toast without eating it. I scrolled through meaningless news on my phone, pretending to read. But underneath, the air pulsed with the sound of that video still playing somewhere in my head, his voice saying, "She deserves to know." That sentence wouldn't stop echoing. If anyone had asked me before last night, I would have said my life was ordinary, warm, predictable in a comforting way. That I grew up in a small town in northern Georgia, where everyone knew who you were, or at least thought they did. Summers smelled like honeysuckle and cut grass. Evenings were for porch talks, sweet tea, and fireflies floating between people's knees like little flickers of God's laughter. Our house was modest, but Mama kept it tidy in a way that made it feel gentle rather than strict. She scrubbed the counters until they shone like lake water in July. The living room always smelled faintly of lavender polish, and there were photos of me in every corner, a baby in a yellow blanket, a gap-toothed 8-year-old. A teenager in a prom dress. Mama called them her life framed. She said she didn't need walls covered in art when she had me. I always thought that was love. Now, I wonder if it was a cover. Still, my childhood never lacked affection. Mama worked as a nurse's aide at the local clinic, gone most days but always home in time for dinner. She never let me see her cry unless it was at church, those Sunday mornings when the choir's harmonies pulled something deep out of her. She'd press her palms together and whisper under her breath, "Thank you, Lord, for keeping us another week." I used to watch her sing from the second pew, her head tilted back, eyes shining. I thought she was thanking God for simple things, bills paid, a working car, her child growing healthy. But now, looking back, I think she might have been thanking him for the things that stayed hidden. My father, at least, the man I called Daddy, died when I was 10. A heart attack. Sudden, fierce, unfair. I don't remember him clearly. I remember moments, like short film reels played in reverse. Him tying my shoelaces before school. The smell of engine oil when he came home from work. His deep laugh rumbling in his chest when I made up songs about worms after the rain. His funeral was the first time I saw Mama collapse. She didn't sob loudly, just sank where she stood, like all her bones forgot their purpose. Afterward, she changed. Not at once, not dramatically, but slowly. Some nights she'd stay up late, sitting at the kitchen window, staring into the yard as if waiting for someone or something to return. When I asked what she was looking at, she'd smile without warmth and say, "The past has its own kind of moonlight. Go to bed, baby." And I believed her. Because mothers aren't supposed to lie. By the time I turned 18, we were almost like friends. I'd help with bills, run errands, call her every evening from my dorm. Mama would tell me funny stories about her patients or complain about the church choir forgetting her favorite hymns. She'd always end our calls the same way: "Keep your heart clean, Lila. This world will try to dirty it." I used to think she meant the usual things: bad influences, broken hearts, choices you regret. Now it sounds like something else, a quiet prayer that I'd never discover what she'd done. There were moments, though, when her calm cracked. Once, in my sophomore year, I came home unannounced and found her sitting at the table with an old showbox. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in ink that had bled slightly from humidity. When she realized I was watching, she shut the lid so fast the latch snapped off. "Old times," she said simply. "Nothing worth rereading." Later that night, I overheard her on the phone, whispering, "Please don't call again." We agreed, no contact. Her voice was trembling, the same way it had trembled in the video I'd found 12 years later. I grew up used to the sense that some corners of her life were dimly lit. I just thought every family had shadows. Ours were tame ones, secrets about Grandma's younger days, Daddy's youthful mistakes, Mama's forgotten ambitions. None of it felt dangerous. So when she grew quiet after dinner or left the room when certain songs played, I never asked. I learned early that some silences between family members are sacred, like locked boxes meant to stay sealed, but last night changed all of that. Now every silence feels loud, and every gesture holds a secret meaning. When she looks at me now, her eyes seem both older and unfamiliar, as if she's waiting for me to ask what she's been building her whole life to avoid. After breakfast, I went outside to breathe. The air was thick with humidity, and the magnolia tree in the yard shimmered with bees. Our porch swing creaked slowly as I sat down. Mama joined me a few minutes later, her robe replaced by an old blue dress, her face bare and tired. "You always liked this spot," she said softly. "Even as a child. You'd sit here with your crayons, drawing clouds." I nodded, though I didn't remember that. Maybe it was one of the memories she'd built for me, the kind that feels true because someone loves you enough to repeat it. After a while, she said, "You shouldn't have gone through my things." "I know," I said, my voice flat. "But you deleted the messages." Her jaw clenched. "Some messages don't belong in this world anymore." I turned to look at her. "You should have told me." Her eyes glistened in the sunlight. "I wanted to." "You think it's easy carrying all that by yourself?" "Whose choice was that?" She flinched. For a moment, she looked small. "You were just a baby," she whispered. You didn't need that kind of pain. But I was your baby, I said. And that man on that video, he looked like me. The wind moved through the magnolia leaves, scattering a few white petals between us. She didn't answer. Just took a shaky breath and said, "Some stories are heavier than the truth can carry." Then she stood up and went inside. I sat there long after she left, thinking about how strange love can look when it hides behind fear. Maybe she wasn't lying out of cruelty. Maybe she was trying to protect what little family she'd built from the shame our town had always been good at spreading. Still, the ache wouldn't settle. The silence between us had turned into a cliff, and I didn't know how to climb down without falling. That night, Grandma knocked on my door. She came in quietly, carrying a folded blanket. "Your mama's been through more than you know," she said, smoothing the fabric over the bed. "But you don't need to carry her sins. Just be kind, even when you don't understand." Her voice was tired, steady. But the way she avoided my eyes told me she knew exactly what that video meant. "Grandma," I asked quietly, "who was that man?" She paused, her hand tight around the edge of the blanket. Then she sighed. "Sometimes God gives you a truth that ain't ready to be spoken yet. You wait, and when it's time, it'll find its way." "That's not an answer," I said. "No, child," she said, touching my cheek. "But it's the truth I can give you tonight." When she left, I turned off the light and lay awake in the darkness, still seeing that man's face, the way his eyes softened when he looked at my mother, the way hers filled with both joy and guilt. I needed answers. I needed to hear his voice again, beyond the fragments stuck in that video. And as the hours crawled toward dawn, a decision formed quietly inside me. If Mama wouldn't tell me who he was, I'd find him myself. I didn't leave the house for 2 days after that morning. Partly because I didn't know how to face Mama, and partly because I didn't know how to face myself. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw traces of him, the man from the video, in the tilt of my chin, in the line of my jaw. How many years had I been walking around wearing a stranger's resemblance? Mama went back to work by the 3rd day, pretending nothing had happened. She moved through the house like a ghost, cooking breakfast, folding laundry, humming when she thought I couldn't hear. The sound of her humming used to lull me as a child. Now it sounded like someone trying to comfort themselves, but something had changed between us. The distance wasn't filled with anger, it was filled with knowing. Once you've seen what someone's been hiding, love doesn't vanish, but it loses its innocence. I started noticing small things Mama had never let slip before. Once, while she was in the bathroom, her phone lit up on the table. A notification flashed, a name I didn't recognize, L. Matthews. The message preview read only 2 words, "Still waiting." I looked away before temptation won again. But that name lodged itself in my mind like a pebble in a shoe. I couldn't shake it. I told myself not to go digging, not after what had already happened. But secrets have gravity, and mine were pulling me deeper. That night, I searched that name. It wasn't hard. A LinkedIn page appeared first, then an old local newspaper article. The article was dated 25 years ago, 6 years before I was born. Local teacher wins award for service at Eastbridge High. The photo was small, grainy, but the face, it was him. The same man from the hospital video. Same hazel eyes that seemed to search you even from a still frame. Lawrence Matthews. I whispered the name aloud, tasting it like a forbidden word. And the strangest part? I remembered hearing it once before. It was during a summer picnic after Sunday service, back when I was little. Mama and Grandma had been helping set up the food tables under the church's old pavilion. I'd been chasing butterflies near the fence when Mama suddenly stiffened, her smile freezing in place. A tall man had walked up, shaking hands with Pastor Williams. The pastor called out, "Sharon, you remember Lawrence, right? Used to teach over at Eastbridge." Mama had laughed too quickly. "Oh yes, of course. Been a long time." I didn't think much of it then. I was too busy begging for lemonade. But now, remembering how she wouldn't meet his eyes that day, it felt like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known existed until now. The next morning, when she left for work, I went into her room. I told myself it wasn't snooping. It was searching for peace, whatever scraps of it still existed. Her closet smelled like lavender sachets and faint hospital disinfectant. Rows of dresses, neatly spaced, her world arranged just how she liked it, still, calm, controlled. In the top drawer of her dresser, tucked beneath stacks of folded scarves, was a small black notebook. The first few pages were scripture verses and grocery lists. But halfway through, her handwriting changed, slanted, hurried. March 2000. He called again today. Said he saw her picture in my wallet. I told him to stop looking. It's too late. Too late for everything. My stomach turned. The next entry read, he wants to meet her. He says she looks like him. I can't let that happen. The pages after that were blank except for a single note at the end. If I disappear, it's because I couldn't balance the truth anymore. The words trembled on the paper, written like someone confessing mid-breakdown. I shut the notebook quickly, my hands shaking. My heartbeat drummed in my ears like a countdown. That evening, as we sat in the living room, the tension between us grew unbearable. The ceiling fan spun lazily, pushing warm air around in circles. Mama watched her favorite quiz show, pretending to be absorbed, while I scrolled through my phone, pretending not to be. Who's Elle Matthews? I asked quietly. Her shoulders stiffened. She didn't look up. Where did you hear that name? I saw it on your phone. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp. You're still invading my privacy. I'm trying to understand, I said. You could just tell me the truth, you know. She turned the TV volume up. Some truths don't heal, Lila. They shatter. Then let them shatter, I said, louder than I meant to. The remote slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a plastic crack. She stared at me, her face pale. Then she whispered, you don't know what you're asking for. Then help me understand. She stood, picked up the broken remote, and said softly, almost to herself, I buried that part of my life so you could have one. Then she walked out of the room, her door closed with that quiet, careful finality that tells you a conversation isn't over, it's just postponed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way she said buried. How do you bury something that still breathes in your own reflection? I opened my laptop again and went back to that cloud backup. The old memories folder was still there, but something new had appeared, a secondary folder labeled backup_restore_92. It looked like an automatic sync, but inside were files from years before I was born. Letters, doctor's notes, scanned forms. One document was dated the same week as my birth. Certificate of live birth. The hospital name matched the video's timestamp, but the father's name had been blacked out digitally, replaced with 5 empty dashes. Then further down, another form, adoption records, partial. My breath caught. The heading read provisional placement, with a signature that looked faintly familiar. Mama's. No. Grandma's, and beneath it, another name signed in shaky handwriting, Elle Matthews. Everything blurred. My hands, the screen, even the lamplight beside me. I read it again, slowly, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves if I gave them time. Grandma had signed adoption papers. Lawrence Matthews had signed them too. But Mama's name wasn't there. T. Dawn. I went downstairs. The house was still. Only the refrigerator hummed softly in the shadows. I made coffee, though I didn't need it. Sleep had abandoned me completely. Grandma came in a little later, wearing her old grey sweater, her slippers whispering against the kitchen tile. She smiled faintly when she saw me awake, though her eyes seemed to read right through me. You been up long? She asked. Couldn't sleep. She nodded, pouring herself water from the tap. Hard to rest when your peace ain't settled. There was kindness in her tone, but I couldn't help myself. Why didn't you tell me I was adopted? Her hand froze midair. The glass trembled just enough to catch the light. She turned slowly, her lips parting in silent shock. What did you say? I saw the papers, I said quietly. And I know about him. Lawrence Matthews. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The hum of the fridge and the ticking clock filled the room in her silence. Finally, she sat down at the table and pressed her hands together. Your mama always said curiosity was your curse, just like his. So it's true. Her eyes softened with sorrow. You were always loved, Lila. Never doubt that. But yes, it's true. My throat tightened. Why didn't you tell me? She sighed. Because some stories are heavy enough to drown a family. Your mama wasn't supposed to be with him. Folks around here wouldn't have forgiven her. When she got pregnant, we had choices, and each one cost something. Her voice cracked. So your mama and me, we signed what we needed to sign to keep you safe. She raised you herself, but the paperwork, that's how we kept things quiet. I felt the room tilt, my sense of self floating far from where I stood all my life. I'd been told we didn't have much, but we had each other. Now I realized even that simple truth came with footnotes. Safe from what? I finally whispered. From shame, Grandma said simply. From them people who always looking for sin in other folks' windows. From your daddy's wife. Her words hit like cold water. His wife. Grandma nodded, folding her hands. He was married. Your mama wasn't supposed to love him. But sometimes women don't choose with their heads. They choose with the part of the heart that don't listen. Through the window, light spilled across the yard, soft and gold like every other morning. But nothing felt familiar anymore. Every object seemed to hum with hidden meaning, the photographs, the furniture, even the walls. Grandma reached out and touched my hand. You look like him, you know. That's why your mama never hung his picture up. Said she didn't need to. She had the living version walking around. My eyes burned. And he knows about me. I reckon he does, she said, her voice trembling. He always did. That afternoon, Mama came home early. She looked at me like she already knew what I knew. No anger this time. Just resignation. You talked to her, she asked. Yes. She nodded, slow, tired. Then there's nothing left to hide. Then she said something that would change the direction of my next decision entirely. If you want answers, she said quietly, you'll find him in Savannah. He runs a bookstore. Still teaching part-time. At the college. Her eyes glimmered like she wanted to say more, but didn't. I waited for her to plead with me not to go. To tell me it wasn't worth reopening old wounds. Instead, she just whispered, be gentle with him. He didn't mean to disappear. Savannah was 3 hours away, but it might as well have been another lifetime. As the miles unfolded beneath the tires, I kept replaying everything Mama and Grandma had said, each word a thread pulling at the fabric of who I thought I was. The drive felt muted, as if the world outside had lowered its volume so I could hear my own thoughts more clearly. When I finally reached the city, the air smelled like salt and jasmine. The streets were narrow, lined with cobblestones that clicked under my shoes as I walked, every step echoing back like a quiet dare. I followed the address Mama had written on the back of an old receipt. Matthew's Corner Books. It was a small shop tucked between a bakery and a barber's, with faded lettering on the window that read Stories Live Here. The doorbell chimed softly when I entered, the kind of gentle sound that makes you feel like the air knows your name. The place smelled of paper and dust and lemon oil, an old, comforting scent that made memories flicker behind my eyes. A man stood near the counter, sorting books into neat piles. His back was turned, but even then, I recognized the posture, the careful precision. When he turned around, the world steadied, then tilted. It was him, Lawrence Matthews. Older now, hair streaked with grey, lines around his mouth carved deep, but the eyes, those amber brown eyes, were the same ones I'd seen in the video. The same eyes I'd seen in the mirror my whole life. He looked up, smiled politely, then froze. His hand slipped slightly from the stack of books. Good afternoon, he said, voice careful. Can I help you find something? For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the questions I'd rehearsed on the drive evaporated. My mouth opened, but only one word came out. Yes, I said. You can. He nodded slowly, studying me now. Something in his gaze shifted, a recognition he was trying not to show. What is it you're looking for? He asked softly. I took a breath that felt like crossing a threshold. The truth. The bookstore was quiet except for the faint hum of an old ceiling fan. He motioned wordlessly toward a back table near the window, away from the few customers browsing the aisles. We sat across from each other. Up close, he looked both familiar and foreign, the way family might appear in a dream you only half remember. His hands trembled when he folded them together on the tabletop. You know who I am, I said. He nodded once, his throat working. I thought this day might come, he murmured. I just didn't expect I'd still be here to see it. Why didn't you come looking for me? I asked. He took a deep breath, gaze scattering toward the window before returning to me. Because your mother asked me not to. And I owed her that much for everything she lost. Lost? I repeated. She's the one who lied to me my whole life. He flinched but didn't argue. She loved you more fiercely than anyone I've ever known, he said quietly. Every choice she made, she thought it was protecting you. From what? He hesitated. From me. From the truth. He leaned back, his voice softening into something reflective. Your mother and I met when she was still in nursing school. I was married then, unhappily, but married. I told myself it was harmless, our friendship. But love has a way of turning ordinary moments into confessions. I stared at him, the details cutting sharp into my chest. She got pregnant, he continued. I wanted to leave, start fresh, build something with her. But her mother, your grandmother, wouldn't allow it. She said it would ruin them both. My wife found out and threatened everything I stood for, my job, my career, my reputation. His eyes glistened, voice cracking. So I signed the papers they brought me. Said I'd disappear if that meant you both could live quietly. They called it an arrangement. I called it surviving a sin. I looked at him through tears I didn't even realize had gathered. So you just walked away? He swallowed. It wasn't easy. Every birthday, every milestone, I wondered about you. I used to drive by your street when you were little. Park at the corner, watch the porch light come on. I saw you once, playing jump rope in the yard. You laughed, and it was hers, your mama's laugh. I couldn't get out of the car. That's not love, I said thickly. That's cowardice. He didn't defend himself. He just nodded. You're right. A long silence swelled between us, filled only by the faint turning of a ceiling fan and the distant scent of coffee from the cafe next door. I wiped my face, ashamed of the tears, but he looked at me like he'd been waiting his whole life to see them. Then he said something I wasn't ready for. She told me she'd delete everything. My chest tightened. Everything? The messages. The recordings. The letters, he said. She wanted no trace left, said the truth belonged to the dead now. I guess she didn't realize the cloud never forgets. So it was him, the sent messages that vanished, the backup I'd stumbled upon. They hadn't been love letters from a new man. They were fragments of a broken past trying, helplessly, to stay buried. I whispered, she thought you were gone for good. She wanted to believe it, he said softly. Sometimes forgetting is the only way people like her know how to survive. After a while, his hand reached across the table, not to hold, but to offer a small envelope. This was supposed to be for you when you turned 18, he said. I left it with your grandmother. Guess she couldn't bear to give it. I took it slowly, fingers trembling. Inside was a small photograph of Mama, younger, glowing, standing near a blooming dogwood tree. Beside her stood him, smiling in a way that made everything make sense and nothing make sense all at once. On the back, in faded ink, were 9 words, forgive the silence. It was built to protect love. I could barely breathe. You both decided to erase me from one half of my life, I said. He looked at me with eyes full of years. We broke ourselves trying to keep you whole. I left the bookstore before dusk. The air outside was heavy with the scent of rain. Cars moved slowly, and the pavement shimmered like glass. Somewhere behind me, the bell above the door chimed as it closed. I walked until the tears came again, those stubborn, angry ones that burn more than they cleanse. For the first time, I felt angry not just at Mama but at the whole fragile web of choices that built my life on silence. When I finally drove back home, the sky had turned the color of steel. The wipers brushed away the rain in lazy arcs. The rhythm of it made my thoughts feel like confession. Every lie she told had been shaped by fear. Every truth he buried had been dressed in love. And nobody had thought to ask what I would have wanted to know. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the windows of the house glowed softly, yellow against the night. Through the living room curtain, I could see her silhouette sitting where she always sat, her hands folded, her head bowed. I walked inside quietly. She looked up, eyes puffy, but calm, as if she had somehow been expecting me. You found him, she said. I did. Silence stretched between us, brittle as glass. Finally, I said, why did you delete everything, Mama? She closed her eyes. Because I couldn't bear for you to see what love made me do. Love didn't do this, I said. Fear did. Her breath shuddered. I thought I could rewrite life by erasing the evidence. I stared at her, shaking. You almost erased me. The kettle whistled faintly from the kitchen, breaking the silence. I turned away before she could answer. I knew, deep down, She'd spent half her life paying penance in the only way she knew how, through quiet service, through pretending that nothing had ever gone wrong, but I also knew the pretending had cost us both too much. In that moment, I didn't want apologies. I wanted space to mourn the life I thought I'd had, the mother I thought I'd known, the father who'd lived like a ghost in the same sky all these years. Mama reached out, her hand trembling. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let this make us strangers." I stepped back. "Then tell me everything. From the beginning." Her eyes filled again, but this time she didn't look away. "Tomorrow," she said softly. "I'll tell you tomorrow." She sounded like someone praying the night would never end. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching dawn creep up over the trees, thinking about the two people who shaped my existence through silence. What happens when truth finally catches up with love? Does it set you free or destroy you? I didn't know yet. But tomorrow, I was going to find out. Morning came slow and grey, the kind of light that blurs the edges of everything it touches. I sat at the kitchen table, stirring my coffee long after the sugar had dissolved, watching the way steam curled and vanished. Mama was still asleep. Or maybe she wasn't. Sometimes she stayed in her room with the lights off, pretending the day hadn't started yet. The heaviness between us followed me, even in silence. I could feel it, like a weight pressing beneath my ribs, quiet but constant. Every time I breathed, it reminded me that peace now required confrontation. I kept hearing her voice from the night before. "Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything." But I couldn't wait anymore. Truth has its own hunger, and mine had gone too long unfed. By mid-morning, I'd packed a few clothes in a duffel bag. My plan was reckless, maybe even foolish, but I needed clarity, not promises of tomorrow. I needed to understand the man who had shaped half my life through his absence. Lawrence. Even his name felt like a wound when I spoke it now. Grandma was in the garden when I left. She looked up from trimming her rose bushes, sunlight glinting off her silver hair. "You driving somewhere, baby?" "I'm going back to Savannah," I said. "There are more questions I didn't get to ask." She frowned, straightening. "You think you'll find peace down there?" "Not peace," I said softly. "Just truth." She hesitated, then nodded, eyes sad but firm. "Then be ready, Lila. Truth don't always come soft. Sometimes it drags its feet through gravel." On the way, the rain started again, thin and steady, streaking the windshield like tired tears. The sky seemed to echo my state of mind, dim, unsettled, ready to burst. I replayed that moment at the bookstore 100 times in my head, the way Lawrence's eyes had softened when he looked at me, the way guilt lived in every pause between his words. He'd called it survival. But what kind of man survives by pretending his child doesn't exist? This time, I wasn't coming to listen. I was coming to ask the questions he hadn't answered. When I arrived, the store was open but quiet. The doorbell's chime sounded again, that same fragile note that still made me feel like I was stepping into a memory. He was there, as before, arranging books, except today his shoulders seemed even heavier. He looked up, startled for a moment, then strangely calm. "You came back," he said. "I said I would." He nodded and gestured toward the back table. When we sat down, he didn't speak first. He just waited, the way parents wait when they know the child has something hard to say. "Why didn't you ever write to me?" I asked. "I did," he said quietly. "Every year. Birthdays. Holidays. I just never sent them." My throat tightened. "You kept letters you never mailed." He reached under the counter and returned with a small wooden box. Inside it, dozens of envelopes lay bound with a faded ribbon, each one marked with my name. Some edges were yellowed with age. "I thought maybe one day," he said, "when it wouldn't hurt anyone." I lifted one of them, dated the year I turned 8. The ink was faded but legible. "Your mother says you like drawing. I used to sketch once too. I wonder if it's in your hands somewhere." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I put the letter down carefully. "Do you love her?" I whispered. "After all this time, do you still love her?" He paused, his voice quiet but certain. "Yes. But not the way I used to. Back then it was fire, reckless, consuming. Now it's ashes. Still warm, but harmless." I almost envied the way he could call it harmless. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of years that had been preserved in silence. He told me about the early days, how Mama's laughter had drawn him in, how her honesty scared him because it felt like freedom. He said she made him feel young again when his marriage had already turned into polite exhaustion. She used to read poetry to me, he said wistfully. Said it was the only way she could tell the truth without anyone accusing her of being dramatic. What kind of poems? I asked. He smiled faintly. Mostly about loss. Even then, she knew how it would end. Later that afternoon, as the light changed in the window, I asked the question that had been chewing at the back of my mind. You said your wife found out. He nodded slowly. She did. And it nearly ruined her. We had a son together, older than you. He was 15 at the time. He blamed me for everything. Still does. My breath caught. So I have a brother. His expression faltered. Half-brother. He's a good man, but he wants no part of this history. He made me promise never to bring it up again. Does he know about me? He hesitated too long. Yes. So he knows I exist, but I'm the family secret, I said bitterly. Lila, he said quietly, it wasn't meant to be like this. But it was, I said, cutting him off. You both chose this. You let me grow up in a house full of love built on a lie. He lowered his gaze. Some lies are told out of mercy. I thought if I stayed gone, it would make your life simpler. It didn't, I said. It just delayed the heartbreak. He looked up then, eyes wet. Then maybe it's time to end the delay. Meet your brother. Silence filled the room as I processed it. The idea both terrified and thrilled me. Another piece of the puzzle I'd never known existed. What if he doesn't want to see me? I asked. Then you'll at least know you tried, he said. But I think he should hear it from you, not me. I nodded slowly. Then I'll find him. By the time I left his shop, night had fallen. The city lights shimmered against damp streets, making every reflection look like some alternate version of reality. Flickering, uncertain. When I checked my phone, there were missed calls from Mama. The sight of her name made my stomach twist. I didn't answer. Instead, I texted one line. I met him again. I'm staying in Savannah tonight. Her reply came minutes later. Lila, please come home. There's more you need to know before you go further. But I ignored it. Her tomorrow had already cost me enough. I found a cheap motel near the riverfront. The room smelled faintly of salt and old carpet, the kind of place that holds the ghosts of travelers who came running from something. I sat on the bed, clutching that bundle of letters from the box. One by one, I read through them. Birthday notes, Christmas prayers, apologies written in faded blue ink. Each one painted a picture of a man who hadn't stopped loving me, even if he never said it out loud. Yet for every word of affection, there was guilt, regret, fear. It was all soaked in the language of someone asking God for forgiveness he'd never earn. The last letter was dated only a month ago. It said, she found our messages again. If she tells you anything, know this, I never wanted you to find out through a screen. I wanted you to hear it from me. But maybe she was right. We both built our safety on silence, and now silence is crumbling. I sat in that small motel room until dawn, holding that letter to my chest, feeling the ache of all the voices that had been hidden from me. When morning came, I made up my mind that it wasn't enough to know the past. I needed to see the present, the people still living in its shadow. If I was truly Lawrence's daughter, then his other child, my half-brother, was part of that truth too. And so, with the letters carefully folded back into the box, I packed my things again. Before leaving, I sent one last message to Mama. When I come back, we're done with secrets. All of them. Then I got in the car, started the engine, and drove toward the name and address his father had scribbled for me the night before. Somewhere along the quiet highway between Savannah and Fayetteville, I realized something new. For the first time since the truth had cracked open, I wasn't just searching for my father anymore. I was searching for myself, the pieces that made me, the ones that had been hidden so long under borrowed love. And somewhere in that search, maybe forgiveness would find me too. The drive to Fayetteville took longer than I expected. Traffic was thick leaving Savannah, and somewhere along the highway, the world softened into that hazy gold that always comes after rain. The clouds thinned, sunlight glinting through the windshield in restless streaks. In my lap sat the wooden box of letters. Maybe it was foolish to carry them everywhere, but they had become my anchor, the closest thing I had to a timeline of love denied and rewritten. The address Lawrence had given me was scribbled on a torn receipt: Daniel Matthews, Riverbend Auto Repairs, 2049, Highway 8. Daniel. My half-brother. I said his name aloud while driving, testing it in my mouth. It felt unfamiliar, too big for me, like stepping into a story that already had its ending written. The repair shop sat at the edge of town, next to a field of overgrown grass and a row of rusting pickup trucks. The building wasn't much to look at: concrete walls faded from years of wind and work, a blue tarp hanging loose above the garage door. Men moved in and out, carrying tools, shouting over the hiss of compressors. And then I saw him, Daniel. He stood near the entrance, talking to a customer. Tall, broad-shouldered, late 30s. His hair was the same shade as mine, but his build was sturdier, like someone who'd learned early how to carry heavy weight without complaining. Even from across the lot, I could see the resemblance. The same slant of the eyes. The same line of jaw. Except his face moved differently. His expression stayed guarded, clipped, cautious. When he noticed me standing there, I saw a flicker of confusion. Then awareness. Then anger. He excused himself from the customer and approached me slowly. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice steady but closed. I hesitated. "I'm looking for Daniel Matthews." "You found him," he said, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag. "What's this about?" I swallowed hard. My name's Lila." Something shifted in his face. The smallest muscle near his jaw twitched. "He already knew you're her," he said quietly. "Not a question." "A fact, yes," I whispered. "I'm her." He looked at me for a long time, his eyes softening with recognition and hardening again with resentment. "My father told me about you a long time ago. Said it was a mistake." The word cut deeper than I expected. "Was that his or yours?" He sighed, tossing the rag onto a workbench. "Look, he made choices that tore our family apart. My mother nearly lost her mind. I was just a kid watching my home turn to ashes because he couldn't keep his vows." His words landed heavy. Each one sounded rehearsed, practiced from years of anger. "I get that," I said quietly. "But none of that was my fault." He stared at me, as if the idea hadn't fully registered until then. "Maybe not," he said. "But you were the proof. You existed, and that's all it took to remind us of what he did." The air between us crackled with judgment and fatigue. I didn't blame him. Part of me even understood him. Growing up, I'd been comforted by the lie that my family was whole, untouched by scandal. He'd grown up with the opposite, truth worn like a scar that refused to fade. "I didn't come here to defend him," I said after a pause. "I came because I needed to see you. You're the only piece of this story that's still living the same truth I am." Daniel didn't speak. He just studied me with eyes that looked too much like mine. "And what do you want from me?" he finally asked. "Perspective," I said. "And maybe a chance to know the part of him that didn't fit in letters or half-truths." He shook his head, a small, resigned laugh escaping. "You sound like him." "How so?" "Always searching for sense where there isn't any." A low whistle from one of his co-workers broke the moment. Daniel turned toward the noise, muttering something before looking back at me. "You eat?" he asked suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "You look like you haven't eaten since sunrise. There's a diner next door. We can talk there. Just keep it short." I nodded, unsure if this was progress or just pity disguised as courtesy. The diner smelled like bacon grease and brewed coffee. Old men sat in booths nursing half-drunk cups, and a waitress with tired eyes greeted Daniel by name. We slid into a corner booth. He ordered coffee for both of us without asking. I noticed the small similarities in habits, how he stirred in exactly one sugar, no cream. "Same as me." He leaned back, studying me again. "So, you met him then?" "Yes," I said. "A few days ago." He gave a small, bitter nod. "And let me guess, he tried to make it sound noble? Like he was protecting everyone?" His tone wasn't cruel, just weary. He said he wanted to come back, but Grandma and Mama stopped him. Daniel scoffed softly. "I don't doubt it. This town loves its secrets tidy. My mother was the same way. She forgave him the day he left, said God demanded it, but she never smiled the same again." He stared out the window then, the kind of stare that reaches 30 years back in time. "He used to read to me at night, you know, history books, poems. had this way of making everything sound like it mattered. After he left, that voice became the one thing I couldn't stand to remember. We sat in silence for a while, both tracing ghosts in the same bloodline. You're angry at him, I said softly. Angry, he repeated. Anger gets tired after a while. What's left is indifference, and that's worse. I stared at my coffee, unsure what forgiveness looked like between people who were connected by the same trauma on opposite sides of it. He continued, his tone quieter now. He wrote me once, years after. Said he wanted to make things right. I sent the letter back unopened. I told him right doesn't exist after betrayal. Do you still believe that? I asked. He looked at me for a long time. I thought I did, he said slowly. Then you showed up. It was the first time his voice wavered. There was something almost gentle hidden beneath the bitterness, a tired compassion trying to find its footing. He sighed. You didn't ask to be born into a story people couldn't handle. You had nothing to do with any of it. The words hit somewhere deep. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. I just nodded. I don't want to replace anyone, I said. I'm not here to rewrite history. I just don't want to carry shame that isn't mine. He nodded too, his expression softening. Then maybe you shouldn't. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The waitress dropped off our check and refilled our cups before disappearing again. Outside, the late afternoon light turned amber, stretching long shadows across the parking lot. Finally, Daniel said, he's sick, you know. I glanced up. What do you mean? He didn't tell you? He shook his head. Figures. He's been in and out of the hospital the last few months. Heart problems. He called me last week asking to see you again. Guess he knew you'd find him before it happened. The words settled like cold air in my chest. He didn't say anything. Daniel sighed. He probably thought he could still protect you from that too. When I left the diner, the first hint of twilight painted the sky. I stood outside for a long moment, the world shifting somewhere beneath me. The anger, the curiosity, the ache, it all tangled into something quieter. Sickness. Mortality. Regret. This wasn't just about lies anymore. It was about endings. Daniel joined me outside, hands in his pockets. You should see him again, he said. Before it's too late. I will, I said softly. He nodded once, then started walking back toward the shop. Halfway there, he turned and called out, hey, just so you know, I don't hate you, Lila. I just never knew how to fit you into a story that already hurt too much. I smiled faintly. Maybe we can write a new one. He nodded again, gave a small wave, then disappeared back inside. By the time I reached the car, my chest felt full and hollow all at once. I looked down at my phone, at Mama's last message, the one asking me to come home. There was still one chapter left between us before I could decide what forgiveness really looked like. Tomorrow, I would go back. Tomorrow, I would make her tell me everything. When I drove home the next morning, the world looked washed clean after a night of rain. The trees leaned heavy with water, dripping in rhythm, and the fields along the road shimmered with the fragile newness that only comes after a storm. I should have felt lighter after meeting Daniel, maybe even relieved. Instead, a different kind of heaviness pressed deeper, one that came with understanding too much. Knowing the truth didn't feel freeing. It felt like carrying a fragile mirror that could break if I made the wrong move. When I pulled into our driveway, Mama was already waiting on the porch, her robe wrapped tight, her hair uncombed. She'd been up all night. I could tell by the way her coffee sat untouched beside her. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. No shouting, no tears. Just two people who had finally run out of secrets to hide behind. I met Daniel, I said quietly. Mama's fingers twitched against her mug. I thought you might. He looks like us. She smiled faintly, but it didn't last. You're both his children, she said. Different lives, same eyes. I waited, but she said nothing more. The silence sat between us like a living thing. Mama, there's something else, I said. He's sick. Her head lifted sharply. What? Lawrence. Heart condition. Daniel said he's been in and out of the hospital. Mama didn't move. Her face went still, as if time itself had stopped. He didn't tell me that, she whispered. You were still talking, I said gently. Even after all these years. She blinked back something sharp. He only called sometimes. To To see if you were doing well. I told him you were strong. That you didn't need him. I studied her face, the fine lines deepened by years of fighting against her own choices. You lied for so long, Mama. Did you ever stop believing the lie yourself? She looked at me, then really looked, her eyes trembling but steady. Every night, baby, she said. Every night I prayed for the strength to believe that lie was love. By the time Grandma came out onto the porch, the morning had turned bright. She looked between us, then sighed, that knowing kind of sigh that only old women with too much history can manage. You both look worn thin, she said. Come inside before the neighbors start speculating. At first, I thought she was just fussing, but she wasn't wrong. Our town thrived on stories. And word had already started to spread because later that day, when I went into town to pick up groceries, conversation quieted wherever I walked. People glanced at me and then quickly away. The cashier at the store gave me that tight, polite smile reserved for scandal, kind enough to hide judgment, but not enough to erase it. That night, as we sat down to dinner, Mama's phone buzzed constantly, messages from friends, co-workers, church members. Some were kind. Some weren't. The next morning, the pastor came by. He was a gentle man, older, with a calm that always made people trust him. He'd baptized me when I was 10. I remembered being small enough to believe that water really could wash everything away. He sat with Mama in the living room, their voices soft but audible through the thin walls. I didn't mean to listen, but words drifted through anyway. I wish you'd come to me sooner, he said. I thought time would bury it, Mama replied. But time has its own way of dragging things back up. It always does, he said quietly. Some sins aren't about scandal, they're about surviving consequences. She sighed. People won't understand. They don't have to, he said. You raised a good daughter. That part speaks for itself. When he left, I joined her in the living room. She looked small in the armchair, hands wrapped around her knees, like she was trying to hide from her own story. Mama, I said softly. He wasn't wrong. You did raise me well. A faint smile tugged at her lips. You make it hard to stay ashamed, you know that. Then stop trying, I said. For the first time in weeks, she laughed, a soft, broken sound that carried relief in it. But our brief peace didn't last. By evening, the storm of gossip had reached full force. Grandma overheard two women whispering outside the general store. Someone else from church sent a message to say she was being talked about with concern. Concern was the polite southern word for scandal. The town loved its quiet drama the way bees love honey, sweet on the tongue, but full of sting. Mama tried to ignore it at first, but she couldn't pretend forever. Sunday came, and with it, the real test. Church. I remember standing beside her that morning, both of us dressed in our best. She wore her blue dress, the one she'd kept for any important occasion. I wore black. It felt like armor. The moment we stepped into the sanctuary, conversation slowed. I could feel eyes scanning us, whispers rustling like wind through dry leaves. Mama held her chin high, walking straight down the aisle. I matched her stride, though my heart hammered in my chest. We sat 2 rows from the front. The music started. People sang. But no one met her eyes. When the pastor stepped up to the pulpit, he looked at us for a long moment before beginning. His sermon wasn't about judgment or forgiveness. He spoke about truth, the kind that hurts, the kind that heals, and the kind that changes the air around you forever. And even though no one said our names, everyone knew who he meant. When service ended, the first person to stand was Grandma. She walked right up to her daughter, took her hand, and said, "Let's get lunch." Her voice was calm and certain, and that broke the spell because one by one, people started approaching. Soft nods, quiet words, "We're praying for you." Takes bravery, Miss Sharon. The truth always finds its way, honey. Not everyone spoke kindly. Some didn't speak at all. But as we walked out of the church that day, I could tell something had shifted. Whispers would still follow us for a while, but shame had lost its grip. Later that evening, I found Mama sitting on the porch steps, staring at the fading sky. I joined her, and for a while we didn't speak. The crickets had begun their nightly singing, and the air smelled faintly of rain and magnolia. "When I was your age," she said softly, "I thought love could make anything right. Turns out, love just makes everything harder to forget." I looked at her profile against the fading light, the lines of her face that told every story she'd ever survived. "What about forgiveness?" I asked. "Does that get easier?" She smiled a little, eyes still on the horizon. Forgiveness ain't easy, baby. It's just necessary. A week later, I went back to Savannah, this time with Mama. She didn't say it out loud, but I knew why. The guilt, the gossip, the years of quiet hiding, she needed an ending. Or maybe just to face the man who'd started it all with her. As we drove, she kept her hands clasped tight in her lap. Occasionally, she'd glance at me and ask, "You sure about this?" And I'd answer the same way every time, "We both need to go." When we reached the bookstore, it was closed. A handwritten sign hung on the door, temporarily closed for family emergency. My stomach sank. I rang the bell even though I knew no one would answer. Mama stood beside me, her eyes glistening like she already understood what emergency meant. The next morning, we found him Savannah Memorial Hospital, room 214. He looked small in the bed, swallowed by the sheets, oxygen tubing resting gently against his face. When his eyes opened and saw us, a soft smile curved on his lips, one part relief, one part sorrow. "Sharon," he whispered. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "You should have called. I didn't want you seeing me like this," he said weakly. "You always remembered me as strong." "I remember you as human," she said simply, taking his hand. I stood near the door, frozen. Watching them together felt like looking at a photograph that had finally moved again after decades, and for the first time, I understood that love and guilt can occupy the same space without canceling each other out. That night, when we left the hospital, Mama didn't cry. She just looked at the stars above the parking lot and whispered, "Peace doesn't come easy, but maybe we're getting close." We were, but peace demands more than reunion. It asks for truth spoken aloud. And ours still wasn't finished. Tomorrow, I would ask her the hardest questions yet. The next morning, the world outside the motel room was painted in soft gold. The kind of sunlight that looks gentle but can still reveal too much. Mama was sitting by the window, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She'd been awake long before me. There were deep shadows under her eyes, and she looked resigned. I poured us both coffee from the small pot on the counter. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence wasn't cold this time, just heavy with the knowledge that today was the day everything unsaid had to be spoken at last. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost tender. "I saw Daniel last night," she said. "He called after we left the hospital." My heart skipped. "You saw him?" "Yes. He stopped by after visiting his daddy." She brushed her hands together as if to shake off invisible dust. "He looks so much like him, and like you." Her words trembled at the edge of pride and sorrow. Then, after a moment, she asked, "Did you tell him everything?" "Almost." I hesitated. "There's not much of everything left to tell." Mama turned toward me then, tears threatening but not falling. "Oh, baby, you don't know how much there still is." Later that afternoon, we drove back to the hospital. The hallways were quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and nurses' shoes clicking against the linoleum floors. Lawrence was weaker than yesterday. The air in the room smelled faintly of antiseptic and wilted flowers. Mama sat beside the bed, her hand resting lightly on his. I stood near the window, trying not to look like I didn't belong there. He opened his eyes slowly. "You came back," he said, voice rasped with both gratitude and apology. Mama managed a smile. "You always were stubborn." He chuckled, then coughed softly. "Guilty as charged." He reached out his other hand toward me. "Come closer, Lila." I did. But I was careful with my steps, as if one wrong move might tear something sacred. He took my hand, warm, trembling, honest. "I spent so many years thinking I'd lost you before I ever got to know you." "You didn't lose me," I said softly. "You just left me waiting." He nodded, eyes shimmering. "And I know that's a wound I can't ever heal. But if there's any kindness left in you, remember your mother didn't hide you out of shame. She hid you from cruelty. Mine, and the world's." I looked at Mama then. She was staring down at the sheets, her tears finally slipping free. "You're right," she whispered. I didn't want her growing up being whispered about like I was. I couldn't stand it. The air in the room shifted then, thicker, closer. It was as if confession itself had its own gravity. "Tell her," Lawrence said quietly. Mama shook her head. "She knows enough." He looked at her, unblinking. "No. She deserves the full truth." She breathed out slowly, the sound trembling. Then she looked at me, really looked, as if measuring whether I could bear what came next. I didn't just hide who your father was, she said. I hid what happened after you were born. My hands went cold. What do you mean? When they made me sign those papers, it wasn't just to keep your father's name off the record. It was an adoption agreement. Temporary, on paper. But it wasn't supposed to be your grandmother signing, it was supposed to be me. She paused. They wouldn't let me. I was too young and unmarried. So Grandma signed as guardian. Just to keep you with me. I frowned. But that's just bureaucracy, right? You still raised me. Her breath caught. For a few months, I didn't. The world tilted. What? She covered her face with her hands, her voice breaking. When you were 6 weeks old, my mother sent you away to relatives in Atlanta. Said it was best until I got my life together. I fought her. Lila, I screamed, begged, but she said I couldn't keep you if I wouldn't name your father. I stared at her, unable to breathe. You mean I lived with strangers? For 3 months, she whispered. 3 long months until I found a way to bring you home. I told her if she kept you away from me, I'd leave for good. So she called the relatives one night and said I was ready, married or not. Lawrence's eyes closed. His face twisted in silent regret. I didn't know, he murmured. Your mother never told me that part. How could I? She said sharply. You were already gone. I had nothing but a baby and a town waiting to shame me for breathing. The room grew very still. Even the machines seemed to pause between their rhythmic beeps. So much grief, so many good intentions turned into pain that I sank into the chair beside them, tears sliding down my face before I even realized. All those years I thought you were just overprotective, scared I'd go too far from home. I never realized what you'd already lost trying to keep me. She looked at me, eyes red. I didn't mean to build our life on lies, Lila. I just couldn't tell you the truth without breaking the story I told myself, that you were mine, always mine, untouched by the world's cruelty. But I wasn't untouched, I said softly. Just unknowing. Lawrence took her trembling hand again. I think she's ready to forgive us, Sharon. She glanced at me, disbelieving. Are you? I swallowed hard, heart pounding. I don't know if forgiveness happens in a moment. But I do know this, you loved me the only way you knew how. Even if it meant lying. Her tears fell freely now. You were the only good thing I ever did right. The sight of her breaking like that stripped the anger from me. I reached forward, laying my hand over both of theirs. Then maybe we can all start over, I said quietly. Father, mother, daughter. No titles, no shame. Just people trying to make peace with what's left. For the first time, Mama smiled through tears. You sound like you've seen the world. I'm learning to see it for real now, I said. That we spent the next hour sitting like that, 3 people bound by truth and time, holding hands in a hospital room that smelled like fading hope. When the nurse came to check his vitals, Lawrence looked up at her and said, "This here is my family." And for a moment, it didn't matter who was legitimate on paper or who had been erased from forms. We were real. When visiting hours ended, we left quietly. As we reached the parking lot, the air was cool, the sky washed with deep purple dusk. Mama turned to me. You shouldn't have had to carry all this weight at your age, she said. Neither should you, I replied. But maybe now that it's shared, it'll feel lighter. She laughed softly, a tired, honest sound. Maybe. That night, we sat in the motel parking lot under the amber streetlight. Neither of us wanted sleep. The air smelled like rain again, the promise of another storm lingering on the horizon. Mama, I said finally, after all this, do you regret loving him? She was silent for a long moment. No, she said, a faint smile curving on her lips. I regret the silence that followed. Love wasn't the mistake. Hiding it was. Her words drifted out into the air, settling into the hum of traffic in the distance. I thought of Lawrence's frail smile, of Daniel's guarded kindness, of Grandma's quiet prayers. All of it, the mess, the pain, the imperfect love, it was all part of the same tapestry. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay that our story wasn't neat, because truth, when spoken, never is. The weeks after that day at the hospital felt like the quiet after an old storm, when the ground is still damp, the branches still bent, but the air, for the first time, feels clean. Lawrence stayed in the hospital for almost a month. The doctors said his condition was stable, though everyone knew his heart was fragile. Sometimes I wondered if it wasn't just the body failing him, but years of regret. Mama visited him every evening. She'd bring small things, coffee in a thermos, a crossword, books. Their conversations were soft and short. Mostly, they sat in shared silence, their years apart bridging slowly in the quiet rhythm of forgiveness. I visited every Sunday. He always asked about my life, my work, where I wanted to go next, and I realized he was trying to know the woman he'd only imagined. One afternoon, I brought Daniel. He looked reluctant at first, hovering awkwardly by the doorway while I arranged flowers on the table beside the bed. Lawrence's face lit when he saw him. "Danny," he said weakly, voice rough but full of gratitude. Daniel gave a small nod, hands in his pockets. "You look better than I expected." His father chuckled softly. "That's your mother's mercy. She always told me pride dies slower than the body." Daniel cracked a faint smile at that. "You didn't have to come," Lawrence said. "I didn't come for you," Daniel replied, glancing at me. "I came for her. She seemed to think this was overdue." I shrugged slightly. It felt important. And maybe it was, because something softened in Daniel as he sat down. They talked about safe things first, the weather, books, work, until silence pressed in. Then Daniel's voice dropped lower. "You hurt a lot of people. But I also realized I built my life around hating you. And that's not living either." Lawrence's eyes filled slowly. "I don't know what to say." "Nothing," Daniel said. "Just focus on getting better. I'll handle the rest of the angry ghosts for both of us." When he stood to leave, he reached across the bed, squeezed his father's shoulder, and said softly, "Don't leave yet. Not until he paused and nodded toward me. "Not until she gets what she came for." Then he was gone. After Daniel left, the room felt strangely lighter. Lawrence looked at me, a faint smile tugging his lips. He's always been strong. Angry, but loyal. His learning piece, same as everyone else, I said quietly. He studied me for a long time. "And you? Have you found yours?" I thought about it. The question hung there, like a string of light dangling between us. "I'm trying," I said finally. "For the first time, I actually feel like I can." He nodded, content. "Good. Don't let my story define yours. We all come from broken pieces. What matters is what shape we make out of them." When he was discharged, Mama insisted on helping him settle into a care home closer to town. It surprised everyone, including me. At first, I thought Grandma might object, but she didn't. She only said, "Sometimes God gives you unfinished chapters just so you'll learn patience while closing them." And patience, real patience, was what healing required. In the months that followed, our lives took on a quieter rhythm. Mama returned to her work at the clinic. She wasn't the same woman anymore. There was something gentler in her now, a kind of humility wrapped in peace. The small walls of secrecy she had built her whole life were gone, and in their absence stood something much stronger, honesty. The town, as towns do, eventually moved on to newer stories. By summer, our scandal was old news. Some people still whispered, but whispers die faster when there's no shame left to feed them. Grandma started attending Bible study again. One afternoon, she invited Lawrence to a church event. "If people can forgive me for burning Mrs. Carter's pecan pie in '97, she said, "they can forgive your past too." He laughed for the first time in weeks. I visited him often after that. Sometimes we'd sit outside under the patio awning of his home, watching birds hop between the feeder trays. One day, he said, "You know, your mother and I used to dream of building a small bookstore by the river. We wanted to fill it with second-hand books and coffee. She wanted to call it The Quiet Chapter." I smiled. "You could still build it." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Not in this lifetime, sweetheart. But maybe you could." The idea stayed with me. Later that night, I told Mama. Her face softened. "He said that." I nodded. She laughed, tears forming. He really believed words could save people. Maybe he was right. And that's when the decision took root. Months passed. Seasons turned. And by the time the first autumn leaves started to gather across the drive, something new had taken shape. With some savings and help from Daniel, who surprised us all by volunteering to pitch in, I rented an old storefront on River Street. It was small, nothing fancy, cracked ceilings, uneven floors, but it felt right that we painted the walls ourselves. Mama brought plants. Grandma baked pies for our first open day, saying, "Nothing greases forgiveness like pastry." And in early October, the quiet chapter officially opened its doors that I stocked it with stories about truth, memoirs, poetry, old family journals. Every shelf was a reminder that even the broken ones belonged somewhere. The sign out front was simple, hand-carved wood. Beneath the name, I painted a small line in white, "Stories heal when told." Lawrence never got to see it in person. The morning of our opening, I received a call from the care home. He had passed in his sleep the night before. Peacefully, they said. When I told Mama, she just sat down on the porch step, quiet for a long time. "Finally," she said, "I thought I'd run out of tears years ago. Turns out they just waited for me to tell the truth first." We drove to Savannah the next day. Daniel joined us. The three of us stood together near the riverside where he used to live. We didn't speak much. Words seemed too small for a goodbye like that. Mama placed a folded letter into the water, watching it drift slowly out until the current carried it away. I asked what it said. "Just one sentence," she replied. "You were forgiven before you ever asked." After the funeral, life didn't return to the old normal, but it found a new one. Mama came to the bookstore often, sometimes sitting quietly near the window, reading or humming. Daniel visited, bringing spare shelves he'd built by hand. Grandma said the place made her feel like every ending in our family finally got its final period. When customers asked about the name, I always smiled and said, "It's for the people who needed silence before they could be honest." Because that's what our story was. Silence, then honesty. Pain, then peace. One evening, near closing time, Mama and I sat out front. The air was turning cool, tinged with the scent of fall leaves and salt from the river breeze. She reached across the small table, her hand brushing mine. "You know what I've learned through all this?" I turned to her. "That secrets don't protect love. Only truth does. And that sometimes, what we hide to save others ends up hurting them the most." I nodded slowly. "And forgiveness?" She smiled. "Forgiveness is just love remembering its name again." Neither of us spoke for a while after that. The sunset painted the river gold, and in that color, everything finally felt gentle again. Later that night, after she left, I locked up the shop and stood at the doorway. The lights inside glowed soft and warm, the way our home used to look before everything changed. I thought of him, of my father, my mother, and all the truths it took us a lifetime to untangle. "Stories do heal," I whispered to the air. "Even the ones that start in silence." We all carry stories inside us, some wrapped in light, others folded in shadow. Mine was a story of secrets, silence, and slow, painful uncovering. A story about a mother who loved fiercely but hid fiercely, a father who disappeared but never stopped caring, and a family reshaped by truth finally spoken aloud. If there's one thing I've learned through it all, it's this: betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes in whispers, unnoticed for years, until one day the silence becomes too loud. And love. Love can survive that storm, but only if we're brave enough to face the wreckage and pick up the pieces. I told you this story in Auntie May's voice, the voice that knows pain doesn't have to break you, that honesty brings its own kind of healing, even when it hurts. I told you a story about hidden identities, family drama, and the slow unraveling of a lifetime's worth of lies. I asked myself, as I ask you now, would you have done what I did? Would you have searched when the truths were hidden? Would you have foregone peace for the bitterness of unanswered questions? Would you have forgiven when every step felt like walking through fire? There is no right answer to these questions. Because in the end, we each choose our peace in the way our hearts can carry it. I hope my story reminds you that no matter how tangled the past, there is always a path forward through forgiveness, through understanding, and through the courage to tell stories that have waited too long to be told. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you in some way, please show some love, like if you believe in the power of truth to heal. Subscribe to hear more stories told in the voice of Auntie May, slow, honest, and raw. Comment below and share your own stories or reflections. How would you have handled a truth like mine? Your story matters. Your voice matters. And sometimes, telling it is the greatest healing of all. Until next time, remember, the quiet chapters often hold the loudest truths. Stay well, stay kind, and always cherish the stories that shape you.